Hello and thank you for joining me here today at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura and today I am talking about East of Eden by John Steinbeck, published in 1952, and I will be comparing it with the 1955 movie directed by Elia Kazan. So I'm finally covering East of Eden, and once I have finished this episode, I will have covered all of the Steinbeck adaptations that are based on like his actual books. Like I know some of his short stories have been adapted, like The Pearl, there's a movie for that. I think there's even a movie for The Chrysanthemums, which is a very short story, but I think they maybe turned it into a short film. I'm not quite sure. But I feel like his main works I will have covered by now because I've done Grapes of Wrath, Of Mice and Men, The Red Pony. Yeah, I guess that's it. And now this one. So I definitely love John Steinbeck and I'm so happy to be talking about him yet again. And once I have read a few more of his books, like Travels with Charlie and Cannery Row and Tortilla Flats are some that I want to cover. So once I have read a few more, I think I will do a like ranking of the John Steinbeck books. So that'll be cool. Also, this summer I will be going to the Monterey Salinas area and I'm going to go to the Steinbeck house and the Steinbeck Center and I'm going to see the Hamilton house. And so I'll be doing a little Steinbeck tour of sorts and I will film parts of it and take a lot of pictures and turn it into a Steinbeck vlog of sorts. So I'm super excited for that. And yeah, so Steinbeck fans, stay tuned for more Steinbeck content in the future. But yeah, so on to the book review for East of Eden. This was actually the first Steinbeck book I ever read. I read it in 2020, so this was my second time reading it. And even though I loved it in 2020, I didn't read another Steinbeck until like the second half of 2022. So in the last 6 months or so, I have read a lot of Steinbeck, but this first one I had read back in 2020. And I loved it then, and I still loved it now as well, although there were times where maybe like it felt it was more profound than it really was, because choice is a huge theme of this book and how we have free agency to choose who we want to be regardless of our genetics, basically. And I love that message and I totally agree with it, but sometimes when they were having these conversations with the characters, there were times where it just, I don't know, it felt like it was trying to be deep when, I mean, it was being kind of deep, but I don't know, it felt like it was trying too hard to come across as being so deep and profound at times. So that would be my one critique, really. But this is, of course, a retelling of Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel and, you know, the story of Eden. And I thought the parallels between, you know, that story and East of Eden were really well done. It's not subtle at all. Like, John Steinbeck is not an author I think of as being subtle. Like, he makes it very obvious what he is going for. And I'm totally fine with that. Like, I enjoy books where the symbolism is more or less obvious and you have to really think and ponder and it makes for great discussions. But I also love when authors just lay it out and they're like, this is what I'm intending with this. And so I just like that he's more straightforward, and he's not straightforward like in a condescending way, like spoon feeding his audience. It doesn't come across as that. It just comes across as him just very clearly letting us know what is going on in the story and what the symbolism is meant to be, you know. And even if the symbolism is obvious, this book still makes for great discussions nonetheless. So I don't want to make it seem like it's not a thought-provoking book or something, you know. But the characters are also fantastic. Steinbeck writes amazing characters. They are each and every one, whether it's a main character or a side character, he always just fleshes them out so well, and they're so complex and you just really get a feel for who they are and they just feel so real. And his dialogue is incredible too. Like that was one thing I remember from The Red Pony. There's a scene where the boy is talking to his grandfather and just they have this very simple dialogue and yet it just felt so genuine and so real. And so he is great at characters, he is great at dialogue. And in this book we have Cathy, who also goes by Kate. So if I say Cathy, Kate, I'm talking about the same lady. And she is a great villain. And she definitely reminded me of some Gillian Flynn characters. I won't name what book or what character, but if you have read Gillian Flynn books and you read East of Eden, Cathy will definitely remind you of a certain Gillian Flynn character. So if you like Gillian Flynn, you should read East of Eden because Cathy is very reminiscent to someone Flynn would write. I will say, you know, this book can be intimidating because it is, I think, like 600 pages. This is a facsimile of the first edition, and yeah, it is 602 pages. So the length can make it daunting, and also sometimes with like certain classics, which this is 1952, I think that's considered a classic, right? Sometimes it can feel daunting because you're like, oh, it's probably just long and boring. And this one, the first chapter might be hard to get into because the first chapter he's just describing the Salinas Valley, and he writes beautifully and he always like sets the scene that way in his books. He always describes the setting. And so I think he does a great job doing it. However, you might find it slow going for certain readers, but don't worry because once you get to chapter 2, we are introduced to some of the main characters, and the ball just keeps rolling from there. And yeah, this is like a generational epic family saga kind of book, and I love books like that. So if you like books like that as well, you should definitely read this one. We span like 4 different generations, I believe, and we hear about the Trask family as well as Steinbeck's own family. So there is some fact mixed with the fiction here, because the Hamilton family is part of John Steinbeck's actual heritage. So that's pretty cool. And when I finished Grapes of Wrath in September-ish is when I read that. After I finished it, I was like, wow, Grapes of Wrath is incredible, but I still like East of Eden better. And now that I have reread East of Eden, now I'm not so sure which I like better. Like, it's a tough call, because initially after finishing East of Eden, I was like, I think I like Grapes better. But then after writing up this post and thinking about East of Eden even more, I'm like, man, I don't know though. East of Eden really is so good. So it is really tough, but they're both amazing. I would recommend both. And I'm not going to try to rank the two of them right now even. And like I said, eventually I'll do a Steinbeck ranking video. So whenever I do that video is when I will give myself the difficult choice of being forced to pick the best John Steinbeck book. But on to the movie. So this is the breakout performance of James Dean, one of the 3 films he was in, which he was also in Giant, which is also based on a book. And that also, from what I read, it sounds like another epic family saga. So I would love to read that book and do a book versus movie for Giant as well. So you might see that in the coming future. The book is really long. The movie is 3.5 hours, so it is quite the undertaking, but I would like to do that. Anyway, this is the only movie of his he got to see before he died, because he died in a car crash. This movie came out in 1955, and I think he died in 1956. Actually, never mind. He died in September of 1955. So yeah, he was in these 3 movies, and that's all we have from him. But he's definitely like quite the presence on screen. And from what I've read about how like he could be difficult to work with at times and was a bit erratic and wouldn't always remember his lines, and he was a method actor and he could be pretty intense. And in some ways that reminds me of Marilyn Monroe, what I've read about her, which I read Blonde last year, which is, you know, not totally factual, but I kind of did a Marilyn Monroe deep dive last year reading that book and watching her movies. So yeah, he kind of reminds me of her in some ways, and obviously they both have tragic lives too, but both of them are also just such a presence on screen. So James Dean, he definitely draws your attention and he draws you into this role. And like I said, he was difficult to work with and he could be difficult to be around for some people, which the woman who plays Abra, she had nothing but positive things to say about everyone involved in this movie, and she loved working with James Dean. Anyway, John Steinbeck met James Dean and he didn't really like him, and he found him, you know, maybe abrasive or difficult. However, he called Elia Kazan and he was like, he's great for Cal. Like, he is Cal. So even if he didn't like him, he was like, this is the guy for the role. And the movie, the woman who plays Abra is Julie Harris. And I talk about her in The Haunting of Hill House because she plays Eleanor in that movie. And that was like 10 years later. And so as I was watching this movie, her voice is what sounded familiar. And so I looked her up and I was like, oh, it's her. But I did want to talk about Elia Kazan. He's a very famous director. Before this, he had released On the Waterfront the year prior, starring Marlon Brando, when it won Best Picture. And I love On the Waterfront. I would definitely recommend watching that movie. East of Eden was nominated for a number of Academy Awards, including James Dean. He was nominated for his performance, and it was after his death. And Jo Van Fleet was nominated for her performance as Kate, and she won. And her nomination plus her win kind of surprises me, because I thought she was fine, but 1, she's not in a ton of the movie, and 2, I wasn't like blown away by her performance, so I was kind of surprised to see that she had won for this. But back to Elia Kazan. His granddaughter is Zoe Kazan, who, by the way, was in Revolutionary Road. I didn't talk about her in the episode because she plays a smaller character. She plays the woman Frank is having an affair with. I can't remember her name now. Anyway, so she is the granddaughter of Elia Kazan, and last year there was an article written saying that she wanted to make East of Eden, and she was partnering with Netflix. So I don't know if it was going to be like a series or a movie, but she was partnering with Netflix, and Florence Pugh, I'm never sure how to say her last name. Anyway, Florence Pugh was connected to play Kate for this Netflix version. So I haven't heard anything since. That was a year ago. I don't know what the deal is now, but I think that would be awesome. I think she would be incredible as Kate. She loves those like intense roles, which, by the way, I covered her in The Wonder, if you want to check that out, which is another Netflix movie that came out last year. But yeah, so if that ends up happening, I would definitely watch it, and whenever it happens, I will make a follow-up video sharing my thoughts on it. But the movie only covers like the last quarter of this book, so it just does like a sliver of the book. So the way I'm going to do this episode is I'm going to first talk about the events in the book that the movie doesn't even show. I'm not going to go too in depth with them, but just kind of touch up on the plot. And then I will move into, you know, the final quarter of the book and to the movie and the changes the movie makes and comparing the two. And going forward, there will be spoilers for both the book and the movie. And this is going to be a longer video already. And so this is, as always, for the YouTube video, this is broken up into chapters down below. So if there's just certain parts of the plot you want to hear about, you can jump around as you see fit. And the section when I start talking about the movie as well, that won't start until the section that is called the lettuce. So once we hit the lettuce is when I start talking about the movie. So the book begins with the Trask family. So we have Adam and his brother Charles. Adam is the firstborn, but his mom committed suicide, and so the dad remarried and she had Charles. So they are stepbrothers. And Charles's mom raises both boys. And their father had been in the Civil War, and he is a very strict disciplinarian, and he loves Adam more than he loves Charles. And we definitely get Cain and Abel vibes with Adam and Charles, because there's a part where it's the dad's birthday, and Adam puts like no thought into his gift, whereas Charles like works really hard on the gift for his father, and yet the father prefers Adam's gift simply because he loves Adam more. And this is something that Charles holds on to like for his entire life, always remembering how he worked so hard on his dad's gift, and yet the dad didn't like it and preferred Adam's. And then also with the stepmom, so Adam at one point, he starts leaving her like secret gifts that she finds. And then at one point the stepmom is confiding in Adam about Charles and how Charles is a good boy. And she's like, yeah, you know, like I've never said this to anybody, but he leaves me secret gifts. But he acts so aloof about it, you wouldn't think he does, but that's just how sweet he is. He's just, you know, sweet in his own way. And she's telling Adam this, and Adam, he's thinking like, wait, what? Like, I'm the one who's giving you those gifts. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting part as well. But eventually the stepmom dies of an illness, and then Adam is forced into the military by his father, and Charles stays on their farm. They live in like Connecticut, I think, and they own this property, and so Charles stays on the property while the dad goes to DC and becomes this like big political bigwig. And Adam, he's in the military and he fights in like wars with Native Americans, and then he ends up just kind of wandering America, and then at one point he is arrested and he has to serve 6 months, and he serves up until like he has 3 days left of his sentence, and then he escapes, and then he calls Charles to, you know, give him money so that he can come back home, and he returns home. And meanwhile, Charles has been writing letters to Adam like while he was in the military, and in a letter we hear about how Charles was trying to remove this huge boulder off of the land, and basically he ends up like hitting his head, and it leaves a mark on his forehead, this scar, this permanent scar, and he is very self-conscious of it. But so Adam and Charles are living back at the house, and they just like they'll be living together for a while, for a few months, and then they get in a fight, and then Adam leaves, and then he's gone for like a year or something, and then he comes back, and then it's good for a while, but then again they just get in a fight, and so they're just in this cycle of sorts. And then at one point, while Adam is away, Charles gets a letter saying that their father has died, and he has left them $100,000, and they had no idea his father had that much money. And this takes place in like the early 1800s, and so I looked it up, and $100,000 I believe was like 1.5 million or something. So he had a lot of money. And when Adam returns home, Charles tells him about the money and that, you know, they split it. And Charles is like, you know, I looked at his papers and he lied about his time in the Civil War. Like he wasn't in the battles he said he was. And I think he was being dishonest about this money, and he was just like living a lie, essentially. But Adam is kind of like, I mean, we don't know that. Maybe he got the money like honestly. Like we don't know one way or the other. So I'm just going to choose to believe that he got it honestly. And Adam also confesses that he didn't love his father. And because he doesn't love his father, it doesn't make a difference to him whether his father was honest or not. So he's kind of like, you know, whatever, I don't really care. Whereas Charles did love his father. And so it bothers him that his father could have been a liar and could have been dishonest. And so he is more torn up about this than Adam, who just doesn't really care. But to move on to Cathy Ames. So Cathy is born a monster, as the book says. And I don't know, I'm sure being a psychopath was like a term that was used, a diagnosis that was used back then. I don't know. This book was written in 1952, but like I said, it takes place 1800s, early 1900s. But yeah, based on the way she is described, it seems like she was definitely a psychopath. So she is cold, calculating, smart, observant, and she will play whatever part necessary in order to get what she wants, and she manipulates people, and she also only sees the bad in people and just the hypocrisy in the world around her. And at a very early age, she learns to use her body in order to manipulate men. And when she's a teenager, she tries to run away, but then her father brings her back home and he beats her. And so then after this, she formulates a plan where both of her parents die and she makes it seem like she has been kidnapped. And that is how she's able to leave home at age 16. And then from there, she sees this guy like, this is all in, you know, the upper East Coast, Connecticut, New York kind of area, Boston, wherever. And so she meets with this guy who runs these different whorehouses and she applies to work for him. And the guy who runs these houses falls in love with Cathy. And long story short, she manipulates him and all this stuff. And he ends up finding out about her parents' death and that it was kind of shady and that her body was never found. And so he brings this up with her and then he takes her. They're living, I think, in Boston, but he has a house up in Connecticut. So he's like, you know, come with me up to see this other house. Which, by the way, when he falls in love with her, he doesn't have her working in any of the houses because he loves her and doesn't want her working. So he like buys her a home and she's just living this posh life. Anyway, so he takes her up to Connecticut and he beats her up and he ends up beating her up so bad that she's like on the verge of death. But like I said, he takes her up to Connecticut and that is where the Trask brothers live. And so he happens to leave her fairly close to their farm and she is able to like crawl her way to their front door and they end up helping her. Which, by the way, when Cathy is beaten up by this man, he leaves a mark on her that leaves a scar on her forehead very similar to the scar that Charles has. And this is, of course, reminiscent of the Bible where we read, "And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. And Cain went out of the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden." Which, as far as the meaning of like why Cathy and Charles get this mark, I mean, both Cathy and Charles, like they're not as good. I mean, Cathy obviously isn't, but even Charles, like he has this darker side to him as well. And so you could see the Cain similarities there with them like being darker people. But so while they are bringing Cathy back to health, Adam ends up falling in love with Cathy because he falls for her manipulation and the two of them end up getting married. Charles, though, sees right through Cathy. I forget what the phrase is, but like, you know, people who are similar can recognize each other, and both of them are similar. They're just, Cathy is obviously very evil and Charles may not be evil, but he definitely has more darkness inside of him, I guess. And so, and he just sees, he's more negative maybe too. Like Adam kind of just sees the world through rose-colored glasses in a way, you could say. And so he falls for Cathy's manipulation, whereas Charles is more skeptical and he sees the truth for what she is. And Cathy knows that he sees the truth. And so she tells Adam before they're married, she tells him like, you know, don't tell Charles we're planning on getting married, like keep it a secret. But yeah, so they end up getting married. One day they come home and Adam just tells him like, yeah, I married her. And then Adam says that they're going to move to California, even though Cathy doesn't want to. He's like, no, we're going. And like the night before they leave, Cathy is still injured, is still like recovering. So she and Adam have not consummated their marriage. And before she and Adam even do, she goes to Charles's room and the two of them end up sleeping together before she's even slept with Adam. But there are a lot of great quotes in this book about how Adam loves the idea of who he wants Cathy to be. And when she says or does something that shows him like her true self, he just like denies it and just holds on to this idea of who she thinks he is and won't accept when she does or says something contrary to that. And he just holds on to this false idol that he has created in his mind of her. And one such quote reads, "Perhaps Adam did not see Cathy at all. So lighted was she by his eyes. Burned in his mind was an image of beauty and tenderness, a sweet and holy girl, precious beyond thinking, clean and loving. And that image was Cathy to her husband. And nothing Cathy did or said could warp Adam's Cathy." And then years later, he is talking to a friend about Cathy and he asks, "I want to ask you something. Was she very beautiful, Samuel? To you she was because you built her. I don't think you ever saw her, only your own creation." Adam mused aloud. "I wonder who she was, what she was. I was content not to know." And obviously Cathy kind of represents Eve in this situation, the scenario. I mean, Adam is named Adam for one. But, you know, Eve is thought by some to be evil in a way because she tempts Adam to take of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, and this ends up having them be cast out of Eden. So people see that as like a sin and something bad, and so Eve therefore is evil. I disagree with this, by the way. I don't think Eve was like a bad influence on Adam or something, because if you read in the Bible, God commands them to multiply and replenish the earth. But in the Garden of Eden, it says they were as little children, and so they therefore didn't know how to multiply and replenish the earth, and they had to take of the fruit of good and evil and the knowledge and to know of the world in order for them to even be able to procreate, right? So they had to procreate, which means they had to know about the world and about their bodies and all of this stuff. And so Eve realized that, where she was like, you know, we can't replenish the earth the way we are because we don't even know how to. So we need to eat of the fruit of good and evil and whatever. And so I think Eve was doing a good thing. And I think she and Adam were meant to be cast out of Eden, and they weren't meant to stay there forever. Because if they did, if you believe in the Bible, if they had stayed in the Garden of Eden, nothing else would have ever happened, and they just would have lived in the Garden of Eden for all time and eternity. So maybe they like broke a commandment by eating of the tree of life or whatever, but by breaking that commandment, they had to do that in order to fulfill a bigger commandment, if that makes sense, but that's my opinion. Anyway, but Cathy also seems to represent like the snake, serpent / devil, because she's often described like her physical appearance is very snake-like throughout this whole book. And then obviously she is evil, and the devil being evil. And so I thought that was really interesting too. And that was something I don't think I had noticed that my first time reading it, was her snake-like quality. So this time around, it was something I was noticing more. But also on the topic of the knowledge of good and evil and that whole thing, there is a part in the book where, so flash forward, Cathy ends up leaving Adam. And there's a part when Sam Hamilton, Adam's neighbor, he tells him like, you know, I have something I can tell you, and it will either kill you or save you. And so this knowledge, this wisdom that he gives Adam is like partaking of the knowledge of good and evil, if that makes sense. And when Sam Hamilton gives him this knowledge, he tells him the truth about Cathy. This helps Adam be cast out of his fog that he was in, because he was just like living in a fog, not knowing the truth. But when he hears the truth, he is finally able to free himself and live outside of the fog, just the way that when Adam and Eve partook of the tree of knowledge, they were cast out of the fog of Eden, right? The fog of innocence that was in Eden. So anyway, just some interesting thoughts right there with Eden and all of that. But like I said, Adam wants to go to California. Cathy doesn't want to, but Adam is like, no, don't be silly, we're going. And so they go and they buy this huge property in King City, which is like a 2-hour train ride to Salinas. And Adam says that he wants to turn it into their Eden. And Cathy is pregnant at this point, and she does try to abort the baby, but it is unsuccessful. And so she ends up giving birth, and it is to twin boys. They are non-identical twin boys. And a few weeks later, as she is recovering, she tells Adam that she is leaving, and Adam is like, what? You can't leave. And so she ends up shooting him in the shoulder and leaving him and the babies. And also when she gives birth, Sam Hamilton is there like being the doctor of sorts as she gives birth. And it's a really interesting scene, because it's just like, you know, giving birth is supposed to be this beautiful experience and this new life, but Cathy is just like, it ends up being kind of like this dark experience, and Sam Hamilton just feels like this heaviness and this darkness on him, being like, man, like what was that? And also prior to this, they find like a meteor on Adam's ground. And so Samuel and some of his sons are trying to dig it up. And there's this line where they say how they're digging up a star, like a fallen star. And I don't know, isn't the devil called like a fallen star or something? And so I thought that was interesting too, that they're digging up a fallen star out of the earth. So I feel like that's something that could be dwelled on and talked about just with that scene right there. But to talk about Sam Hamilton and the Hamiltons in general a bit more, like I said, so throughout the story of Cathy and the Trasks, we get chapters intermixed about the Hamilton family. And this is on Steinbeck's maternal side. This is his mom. Sam Hamilton is his mom's father. And Sam Hamilton ends up becoming like a friend or like a mentor or advisor to Adam in a way. And he plays a very important role for Adam. And then some of his children play important roles throughout the book. Like Adam at one point, Desi Hamilton is one of Sam's daughters, and Adam ends up buying her home. And then you have Tom Hamilton, who also is kind of, he comes and helps out on the property sometimes. But then Will Hamilton plays a key role later on with Cal, one of Adam's sons. So Will and Sam Hamilton play the biggest roles as far as their connection to the Trasks. But yeah, we hear about like all of the Hamilton family throughout this book. And like I said, those parts are some fact mixed with the fiction. And one brother I wanted to talk about is Tom Hamilton. And he lives on the farm with his mom and dad. And Sam Hamilton says how he is struggling with greatness. And his struggle with greatness is him like struggling to figure out like who he is and what he wants to be, I guess, and if he wants to embrace greatness or just let go of that and just coast in life kind of a thing. And he also is more of an emotional person too, and more sensitive, and he writes poetry, which was like not a thing for men to do back then. But it is very sad, because we see that he ends up committing suicide in a very sad chapter of the book, because he accidentally causes the death of his sister Desi. And John Steinbeck, he ends up naming, in real life, he named his son Tom after this uncle who had passed away. And so I thought thought that was really touching, and just it's such a sad, tragic chapter, but beautifully written. And I did think while reading this book though, like, it seems kind of random at times that we're getting the Hamilton stories mixed in with the Trask family. Like, when it connects to the Trasks, it makes sense, but oftentimes we just get random stories about, you know, John Steinbeck's mom or whatever, and it just feels a little out of place. Like, I'm assuming he did it to provide like a dichotomy between what's going on with the Trasks plus just what was happening with his own family. And when he talks about his own family too, it also kind of helps to set the stage as to what was going on at that time in Salinas and in the world. So on one hand, I do like it that we get these parts with his family, but then there are certain things where I'm like, should this just have been a different book? Like, why did he feel the need to combine this with the Trask story? So overall I like it, but there were certain times where I was just like, maybe a little confused why he chose to combine these two stories together. But yeah, like I said, Sam Hamilton and Will Hamilton play the biggest role in the Trask family. However, in the movie, there is no Sam Hamilton, and Will Hamilton is the only Hamilton from the book that made it to the film. Which, and speaking of people that the movie got rid of, Lee is a very important character in the book that is not in the movie at all. He is a Chinese man who works for Adam Trask. He starts working for him like right when he moves there, so Lee knows Cathy, and then he works for him like till the end of the book. And there is that one point where he leaves Adam to go start a store in San Francisco because he loves to read and he loves philosophy, and so he has this dream to own a bookstore. So he goes to open his bookstore, but then he just feels so lonely and just doesn't like it, and he misses Adam and the boys, and so he ends up coming back home. But yeah, Lee is kind of like Sam Hamilton. Like, he's very philosophical and he's very smart, and he sees things that Adam just doesn't. And even though like right from the start he is just a very wise person, he still does have a nice arc throughout this book. And I do like too how when he gets older, he gets to a point where he just doesn't have the patience he used to, and he doesn't put up with people's bull crap, and he's just like, I don't have time for this. And he just calls it like he sees it. And, you know, maybe when he was younger, he was more polite and reserved, but as time goes on, he's just more straightforward. And I don't know how anyone could read this book and not love Lee, because he's just such a great character. But yeah, like I said, he ends up leaving the Trask family, but then returning because he does just genuinely love Adam and his two sons, Cal and Aron. And then Abra, who is a character later on, he forms a love for her, and they have this father-daughter relationship. And yeah, I was so sad they removed him from the movie. And in the movie, like, he is such an important character in the book, and he has so many key moments. But in the movie, they gave a lot of his lines to Abra instead, which I thought was kind of interesting. Interesting as in, I didn't love it that they got rid of him, but it was just interesting they gave the lines to Abra instead. But to talk about Cathy again, so after she leaves Adam, remember he's in King City, she goes to move to Salinas, which is like a city, which is about like 2 hours away, like I said, by train. And she applies to work at a brothel there, which is run by a woman named Faye. Long story short, she kills Faye and takes over the brothel. And not only does she end up, you know, running this house now, but this house becomes like the most low down and depraved of all of the houses. And so, you know, when people say they're going to go to Kate's house, it's like, oh, like, are you sure? Like, because it's just so much more intense, and depraved is the best word I can think of. Which, speaking of that, and going back to Cathy being considered a snake, so this is my view of the Bible. So the devil was never like literally a snake. It's just when he tempts Eve with the apple, after that he is cursed, and God curses him like to become a snake or something. But I think even that is symbolic, where snakes, they don't have any legs and they're as low to the ground as you can get, right? Like they're slithering in the grime and the grossness of the earth. Not that the earth is gross, but you get what I'm saying, right? They're low down, as low as you can get. And so God cursed the devil, Satan, to be as low as you can get, meaning he had to use the most low down and depraved methods to tempt people to get him to his side. And even the devil himself is disgusted at the methods he has to use. And depraved is just the word I keep coming back to, where even he doesn't like the depraved ways he tempts people to get on his side. And so it makes sense that Cathy, not only does she run this house, but she runs like the most depraved, messed up, screwed up one there is. Because like the devil, she has been cursed to just not only use these bad methods and bad temptations, but she does it in such a low down, dirty way. But after she leaves Adam for like 11 years, Adam is just kind of like a ghost, because he had loved Cathy, because he had this image of her that wasn't real. And so he was just heartbroken about what happened. And it isn't until the boys are 11 years old, Samuel is getting ready to move, and he goes to see Adam. And this is when he tells him the truth. And he's like, I have medicine that can either kill you or save you. And this is when he tells him, like, Cathy is alive, she's in Salinas, and she's running a whorehouse, and that's what she's doing. And she's running, like, the most disgusting one there is. But this helps jolt Adam out of the stupor, and he suddenly, like, kind of comes alive. And then Samuel ends up dying a few months later, or maybe more than a few months, maybe 6 months later. And so he is buried in Salinas, so Adam goes to the funeral, and then afterwards he goes to Kate's house, to the house she runs, to go see her. And this visit, seeing Cathy for who she is, just really frees Adam. While meanwhile, it kind of flusters Cathy because she doesn't have the upper hand anymore and she can't manipulate Adam the way she used to be able to. And there's also this scene where he talks about how Cathy thinks she knows people so well, but really she just sees one side of people and she refuses to see any other side of people. And she talks about how, like, you know, she doesn't want to be human and I'd rather be a dog than a human, but I'm not a dog and I'm smarter than all humans and nobody can ever hurt me because I'm too smart for anybody. And she goes on to tell him about, like, all of the sick things the men are into that come to her house and how they're all these, like, upright citizens in the world. But she's like, but I see them who they really are because I see how sick and twisted and disgusting they are. And she sees their evil as being worse than hers because they have, like, the hypocrisy, acting like, you know, out in the world, like they're normal, decent men. But then she sees who they really are. And she just feels superior to them because she's not giving in to these, like, gross temptations. Instead, she's just using these men's weaknesses to manipulate them. And so she sees herself as more superior because she's just doing it in order to get control over something and manipulate people, whereas these men, it's an actual weakness and a temptation for them. But Adam says to her, I know what you hate. You hate something in them you can't understand. You don't hate their evil. You hate the good in them that you can't get at. And then Adam continues, just now it came to me what you don't understand. You know about the ugliness in people. You showed me the pictures. You use all the sad, weak parts of a man and God knows he has them. Yes, that's right. You don't know about the rest. You don't believe I brought you the letter because I don't want your money. You don't believe I loved you. And the men who come here with their ugliness, the men in the pictures, you don't believe those men could have goodness and beauty in them. You only see one side and you think more than that, you're sure that's all there is. And so I do love this part where he's talking about how, you know, men do have an ugly side and they do have, like, where does he say, you know, their sad, weak parts. And, like, God knows men have those, men and women. But how there's so much more to them, though, still, right? And even if someone gives in to, like, these sad, ugly parts of themselves, that doesn't even mean they're a hypocrite necessarily. It just means that they're a human who sometimes gives in to their weaknesses, right? But just because they're also trying to be a good person, it doesn't mean that they genuinely aren't trying to be good. It's just that they're not perfect and they end up giving in to temptations, like I said, and sometimes they give in to worse temptations than others. But Cathy refuses to believe that they could have any goodness, and instead she just thinks that what she sees is the real them, and the them they show to the outside is just a fake part of them. But Adam is like, no, like, that's the real part of them too, but you refuse to see that. So I thought that was a great moment between the two of them. And by the way, some of this conversation happens later. I'm kind of jumping around, but at one point Charles dies and he leaves some of his money to Cathy. And so Adam goes to give Cathy the money, and this is when, you know, she's like, what's in it for you? What are you doing this for? And he's like, I'm just trying to give you the money, but you don't believe in the goodness of people, so you therefore think I have ulterior motives, when really I don't. I'm just trying to be a good person and give you this money that is rightfully yours. But anyway, so I think that is as much as I need to cover before I get into Cal and Aron, who again are the sons of Kate, Cathy, and Adam. So now it's time to get into their teen years, which is where the movie begins, when Cal and Aron are teenagers. So when the boys are like 15, Adam gets this idea to ship lettuce to the East Coast using ice in a train car. And he still has a lot of money, which, like I said, Charles died, and Charles had the money from his dad plus just extra money he had on top of that he made off his land. And so Adam now has even more money. And so he decides that he, just as like a fun thing to do, he's going to buy the ice plant and he's going to ship lettuce across the United States. And he doesn't care about making a profit. He's just interested in doing it. And the town is very excited. And so it's a big deal when the lettuce is, you know, shipped off on the train car. But in both book and movie, it fails miserably and he loses a lot of money on it. In the book, he still has a fair amount of money, like they're still living comfortably, and he did buy the ice plant, which makes, you know, a small profit. So it's not like a huge stress. However, the boys are teased about it at school and they're called lettuce head, and Aron especially just hates the way he's teased. And so both sons kind of like are upset at their dad for causing this embarrassment to happen. Even though the dad in the book, Adam, he doesn't really care. Like I said, he was just kind of doing it for fun just because it was something he was interested in doing. Whereas in the movie, Adam seems more concerned about the money. And there's a part where he's even talking about it, like stressing about money because of all the money that was lost on the lettuce. And by the way, at this point now, Adam and Cal and Aron and Lee, they all live in Salinas. So they bought a house in like downtown Salinas, and that is where they are living now, which remember, that is where Kate lives in the book. And so Adam knows Kate lives there, and he told the boys that she had died. And so the fact that he chooses to move them to the town where she lives and where she is kind of like a notorious figure in the town. And there's already like rumors around town about Kate. And so it's like, did he want his boys to find out the truth? Because that seems like a dumb move to move to the town where their mother is. And you know they're bound to find out the truth about her. So one, you should just tell them yourself. Or two, tell them yourself, but then don't move to the same town she lives in, right? Like, I feel like that was one thing with the book where it just didn't make sense. Like, why would Adam have done that? Whereas in the movie, Adam doesn't know what happened to Cathy. So that is a huge difference right there. He kind of like assumes she went to the East Coast or something. That's what he thinks. And also in the movie, he's a very religious man and he will make them read scriptures together. And when Cal is being bad, he is like, you know, read this verse and learn how you're sinning and whatever. And that was not in the book at all. Adam like wasn't into religion. And also like there was a part in the movie, like I said, where Cal gets in trouble and it just causes further animosity between Adam and Cal. Whereas in the book, there's a part where Cal gets arrested and Adam goes to pick him up the next morning, and it is just the two of them at home. And they end up having this heart-to-heart, and Adam confides in Cal about how he had served time in jail when he was younger, and they just have this moment of bonding, and Cal is just like so grateful because he is so desperate for the love of Adam. And so in this moment, he's just soaking it up and loving this moment of them being close. And there is nothing like that in the movie. And in both, though, Adam does prefer Aron over Cal, but like everybody does, because Aron is just very good-hearted, good-natured, and he also is just very angelic looking. And he also looks more like Cathy, because Cathy has very like soft angelic features, so to speak, while also being very snake-like. But she's very pretty and innocent looking, and Aron is also very just innocent and sweet looking. And so Cal is like, you know, he loves Aron because he looks like her. But yeah, basically everybody does prefer Aron over Cal because Cal is just kind of dark and brooding. And when he tries to mimic Aron in order for people to like him, people can see that he's not being sincere, and so it just makes them dislike him even more. And a part in the book that kind of shows the differences between Cal and Aron, it reads that Aron was content to be part of the world, whereas Cal had to change the world. But yeah, so Cal, he finds out the truth about their mom. Both of them had heard rumors that she was still alive, but Cal like more sought out the truth, and he ends up seeing her in town and he follows her. And in the movie, he is able to like gain access to her office and see her. Whereas in the book, he is following her, and one day he's following her and she confronts him. But in the book, he feels like he's just destined to be a bad person given who his mother is. But Lee will not have it, and he says that Cal can still choose who he wants to be. And when Cal is like, no, I can't because I have bad in me and there's nothing I can do about it, Lee says, you've got the other two. Listen to me, you wouldn't even be wondering if you didn't have it. Don't you dare take the lazy way. It's too easy to excuse yourself because of your ancestry. Don't let me catch you doing it. Now look close at me so you will remember. Whatever you do, it will be you who do it, not your mother. And so Lee knows that Cal knows, but Adam doesn't know that Cal knows the truth about Cathy. And Cal promises Lee that he will not tell Aron because Aron, you know, he's just more, I don't know, soft, I guess, and more innocent and more positive thinking of the world. And so he knows it would just destroy Aron to learn the truth. So he promises not to tell him. And at this point in the book, not in the movie, but in the book, Aron decides to join the ministry. And so Cal is just getting tired of Aron's self-righteousness. And there's a line in the book which reads, Cal watched his brother triumph over sins he had never committed. Which I thought was a great line. But in the movie, Aron does come off as self-righteous. He doesn't like join the ministry or anything, but in both we see that, like Adam, Aron doesn't have to work to impress his father, and his father just loves him anyway. Whereas Cal, like Charles, tries really hard to win his father's affections and has a harder time getting it. And like I said, Cal just resents Aron because everybody's just so quick to love him. While at the same time, he does love Aron too, though. So he kind of has, you know, these mixed feelings towards him. But we have the character of Abra. So in the book, we see that they meet when they are 11, whereas in the movie, like I said, the movie starts when they're teenagers. And so Abra and Aron are planning on getting married. In the book, they make plans to get married when they're 11 years old. So obviously that was too young to actually get engaged. However, by the time they're teenagers, they are still dating and they're not like officially engaged, but they're, you know, going steady and have plans to be together. And when Aron joins the ministry, he tells her that he has to live a life of celibacy now. And she just kind of goes along with it, just assuming it's a phase and he will eventually grow out of it and they will be married. And in the book, Abra and Aron are definitely kind of just like in their own little bubble of the two of them. And then when Aron goes off to college, he goes to Stanford, that is when Abra starts spending time with Aron's family and she learns to love Lee and she respects Adam and she will even talk to Cal on occasion. Whereas in the movie, we don't see Aron going to college. He is around all the time. And so while he is around and while like stuff is happening, she and Cal just get to know each other and they're, you know, they get close and open up with each other. And there's a part where they even kiss each other, but Abra feels super guilty about it because she's like, I love Aron. What am I doing? And in the movie, she confides in Cal about how she feels Aron loves this version of her that doesn't exist and it's a version of her that he has created in his mind, when in reality she is much more flawed than Aron thinks. And this is in the book as well. However, this doesn't happen in the book until Aron is at college and he's writing letters to Abra. And in these letters, he's talking to Abra and she's just like, he's not even writing letters to me. He's writing letters to the idea of me. And does this sound familiar? Because Aron's father, Adam, did the same thing with Cathy. Granted, Cathy was evil and Adam was like blinded to that. Whereas Abra's not evil. She's just a human being with flaws who is not perfect. But Aron has this idea of her being more perfect than she really is, and it just causes Abra to feel like she's not even being seen and like, does he even love me? Because apparently he doesn't even know me. He just has this idea of me. But in both book and movie, Cal wants to earn back the money his father lost on the lettuce. And so, by the way, in the book, Adam is talking to Will Hamilton about this, and Will Hamilton is very good with money and he has a lot of investments. And Will tells Adam, like, don't put money in lettuce, put money in beans, because when this war starts, bean prices are going to go up. So you want to be invested in beans. But Adam is like, I don't even care about making a profit. I have zero interest in beans. But this lettuce and ice idea, this is what I'm interested in. Whereas in the movie, Cal actually goes up to his dad being like, hey, you should invest in beans. I was reading an article and beans are going to be worth a lot of money soon. But again, Adam is just like, I'm not interested. But yeah, so in both, he goes to talk to Will Hamilton and he's like, hey, I want to earn money back, the money that my dad lost. So you're rich, so how can I do this? And in the book, Lee had told Cal, he knew Cal was like up to something. And so without knowing what was going on, Lee is like, hey, if you need money, I have $5,000 I can loan you. And so when Cal goes to see Will Hamilton, he tells Will, like, I have $5,000 I can invest. And Will is like, okay, yeah, let's do this. And they invest in beans. And in the book, he has a very candid, open conversation with Will Hamilton where Will Hamilton is like, are you trying to buy your father's love? And Cal admits, like, yeah, I kind of am. And Will is very like taken with just Cal's openness and his honesty. And we also see into Will Hamilton and how he himself tried to secure his place in the family and be needed and loved because he had money and he was always reliable to pay for things. And so I thought that was a great scene in the book. But in the movie, so Will Hamilton says, like, you know, I'm willing to partner with you, but you need to have like some actual capital you can invest in. And so in the movie, Cal goes to Kate and he asks her for $5,000 so he can do a business deal with Will Hamilton, and Kate agrees and gives him the money. And so that was a huge change. And in general, Kate in the movie just was pretty different from the way she was in the book. Like, she definitely sees the negative side of people and believes they're all hypocrites, whereas she is superior. However, she's just not as cold and calculating. And in the book too, she like doesn't trust people and she kind of spirals in this paranoia. And we don't get that at all in the movie. So they definitely changed her character quite a bit. But Cal eventually does, you know, he makes back Lee's money plus interest, and he makes back the money his father lost on the lettuce. And so he pays Lee back. And then on Thanksgiving, he has like these gold notes from the bank for the money, and he plans to give it to his father Thanksgiving. This is the book, by the way, specific to the book. And Aron is back from school, and he confides in Cal that he is miserable at school and he hates it and he doesn't want to go back. He just wants to stay here, marry Abra, and move on to their farm. And that night, they have a Thanksgiving meal and Abra is there and Adam is just like so happy and so content, and it was this great family time. And then Cal presents him with the gift, and when Adam opens it, he ends up being angry about it because he works on the draft board, sending young men out to war, and it's just like tears him up having to do it. And so he's like, I don't want to profit off the war. Like, how could you think that I would want this? And I don't care about the money. Like, if you want to give me a gift like your brother has. Your brother is living a good life and, you know, he's going to school, he's going to college. You know, give me that kind of a gift of living a good life. That would actually mean something to me because I don't care about this money and I don't want to profit off of the war. And then Cal is just very upset and embarrassed, and this is happening in front of everybody, and he just gets up and leaves. Whereas in the movie, it is actually Adam's birthday. So Cal confides in Abra about the money. In the book, he just confided in Lee, but Lee doesn't exist in the movie, so he confides in Abra. And so Abra helps him decorate the house for the party, and Cal is just very excited. Meanwhile, Aron is just kind of like being moody and whatever. And so the dad comes home and he sees the party, you know, the house is decorated for his party, and he's very touched. And then Aron shows up, and then Cal gives the dad the gift, but before he opens it, Aron butts in being like, oh, by the way, my birthday present to you is that Abra and I are engaged. Which, by the way, he didn't talk to Abra about this. He just randomly like spurs this on everybody. And the dad is like, oh, that's amazing. You know, I love Abra. That's wonderful. And then he opens the gift. He sees the money. And like the book, he just gets very angry. And he's like, what is this? Like, again, I don't want to profit off of the war. And if you want to give me a gift that would mean something, give me a gift like your brother. You know, he's engaged to a wonderful woman. He's, you know, living a good life. Give me a gift like that. Like, just be a good person and live a good life. And that's what I want. And then in the movie, Cal ends up breaking down crying and he goes to hug his dad. But the dad is just kind of thrown off being like, you know, Cal, like, what are you doing? And then from there, Cal runs outside. And by the way, in the movie, that was not in the script for Cal to like cry and hug his father. And that is something James Dean just did in the moment. And the actor who played the dad was very caught off guard. So that was just his reaction to the scene that wasn't in the script. And also I read that James Dean himself had like a very turbulent relationship with his own father and wanting to be loved and accepted, but not finding that love and acceptance. So it seemed like, from what I've read, that he, you know, had a lot of similarities between Cal and himself. And so that moment, you know, maybe that was just what he was feeling as himself, but also he was a method actor, so feeling what Cal is feeling, and he just did that in the moment. But yeah, so as far as Cal killing Aron, the way Cain kills Abel. So in the movie, Cal goes outside and he's like behind a tree, like in the bushes, kind of just, you know, very upset. And then Aron goes out there and he is super harsh and he's like, you know, you're such a screw up and I don't want you ever talking to Abra and I hate you and I don't trust you and whatever. And he's very harsh and it feels like it comes out of nowhere. I mean, they got in a fight earlier in the movie, but still, it was just kind of like, wow, like, okay, Aron, like kick him while he's down, geez. But anyway, after he says this, Cal gets up and he's like, you know, why don't you follow me, Aron? I have something that I want to show you. And then he takes him into Monterey, which in the movie, they live in Salinas, but Cathy is in Monterey. So she's in a different town. So he takes her to Monterey. He shows Aron Cathy. He's like, this is your mother. And then from there, Aron gets drunk and then he gets on a train to enlist in the military. And then when Cal goes back home, they're like, where is Aron? And Cal says, I don't know, am I my brother's keeper? Which of course is what Cain had said when God asked where Abel was. And then from there, the sheriff comes in being like, Aron is enlisting in the military, you gotta go stop him. And so Adam runs to the train station and he sees Aron on the train already and he's drunk. And it's this great scene where Aron like breaks the glass of the train open with his head and he's just laughing and being kind of crazy as the train goes away. And, you know, he's enlisted in the military and World War I is happening, so he's going off to war. Whereas in the book, so Cal, he runs out and leaves, and later that night he's just wandering the town and he sees Aron walking because Aron had been walking Abra home. And so when Aron is walking after dropping off Abra, Cal is like, oh, hey, Aron, like, can I have something to, you know, I have something to show you. And like the movie, he shows Aron Cathy. He shows them face to face being like, this is your mother. And Aron from there is very distraught and he runs to a different town. And in that different town, he enlists in the military and he sends a telegram home being like, I'm in the army now. And then at one point, it's been a couple days, they haven't received the telegram yet. And the sheriff is looking for Aron and they ask Cal like, oh, like, where's Aron? And Cal is like, you know, how should I know? It's not my job to look after him. But the reason they're looking for him is because Cathy has died and she has left all of her money to Aron. And so they're like, she was super rich. And so now we need to find him because he gets all this money. In the movie, we just see that Aron enlists in the army and that's that. Whereas in the book, so when he enlists in the army, Adam suffers a minor stroke, but he doesn't realize it, but he's having like vision and head issues. But like a few months pass and he's doing better and he's healing. But then they get a telegram that says that Aron has died in the war. And when they get this telegram, he has another stroke that like makes him bedridden and is much more severe. And so in the book, Aron does end up dying, and Cal feels so guilty because it was his actions that led Aron to enlist in the military. And so he just feels this guilt, and then he knows his father blames him. So he just feels this burden that is too great to bear on himself. But to talk about Cathy real quick, because like I just said, she left all of her money to Aron. So after she and Aron meet face to face, which she also in the book was dealing with this lady who was trying to blackmail her. And then her, like the bouncer of her house was also trying to get more money from her. And then she also just gets lost in this paranoia, right? Because she doesn't trust anyone and she's just going a little crazy. And so in the end of the book, she ends up deciding that she's just going to commit suicide and she leaves all of her money to Aron. And the guy, by the way, her bouncer, both of the people who were trying to blackmail her end up dying. But in the movie, we don't see any of this. We see her and Aron meet, and then after that, we don't know what happens to her. But yeah, in the book, we find out she has this like fascination with Alice in Wonderland, and then she takes some medicine and she kills herself. But to talk about the end of the book and movie, so in the book, after they learn that Aron is at war, before he has died, when he's at war, Aron and Cal, Aron and Cal, Abra and Cal become very close, and they start dating basically and just become very close and open with each other. And Abra likes that Cal actually sees her for who she really is, and he doesn't want her to be someone who's perfect, and they both accept each other for who they are, and they see each other clearly, you know? But then when they find out about Aron's death, Adam suffers that stroke, and so he's bedridden and they don't know like how conscious he is. But Cal sees him and he can see like in his eyes, he sees that Adam blames him for Aron's death. And so he's just feeling horrible. And so he's gonna leave the house, and Lee is like, no, like go get Abra. And so he goes to see Abra and he tells her, and he wants to leave, but Abra is like, no, we're gonna go back to the house and we're gonna see your dad. So they go back to the house and they go in to see the dad, to see Adam. It's Lee, Abra, and Cal all go to see Adam. And Lee says to Adam, Cal did a thing in anger, Adam, because he thought you had rejected him. The result of his anger is that his brother and your son is dead. And then Cal says, Lee, you can't. And then Lee says, I have to. If it kills him, I have to. I have the choice. And he smiled sadly and quoted, if there's blame, it's my blame. Lee's shoulders straightened. He said sharply, your son is marked with guilt out of himself, almost more than he can bear. Don't crush him with rejection. Don't crush him, Adam. And then in the book, Adam responds with the Hebrew word for thou mayest. And earlier in the book, Adam, Sam, and Lee had talked about this part in the Bible where God says, thou mayest like conquer over sin. And so there's different translations, and some of the translations make it seem like it's a commandment, but this Hebrew translation says thou mayest, where he's giving a choice, like you can if you want to. You're capable, but it's up to you and it's your choice to conquer this or not. And so by Adam saying that, thou mayest, it's his way of saying that, you know, Cal isn't a bad person, and that Cal can choose who he wants to be. And he doesn't need to let what has happened with Aron mark him for the rest of his life and like determine who he is, you know, like he can still choose to be a good person and to move past this, and that Adam wants that for him. And then from there, Adam dies at the end of the book, and that is that. Whereas in the movie, there is no Lee, like I said. So there is a point where Cal leaves the room because he is feeling guilty. He leaves the room where Adam is. And so it is just Abra in there, and she tells Adam, she's like, hey, like Cal loves you and he wants to feel needed and he wants to feel loved. And that's why he did what he did to Aron. And in the movie, remember, Aron is still alive. He's just at war. Anyway, so she's like, you need to let him know you love him. You need to ask something of him so that he feels needed and feels loved. And so Cal comes back in the room, and Adam like weakly tells him that he doesn't like the nurse they have and that he wants Cal to fire the nurse, and he wants Cal to take care of him instead. And so the movie ends with Cal sitting by his father's bed, just very, eager to help his father and feeling loved and feeling needed. And that is how the movie ends. Which, by the way, like what leads Adam to say he doesn't like his nurse is the nurse keeps trying to interrupt them. And so Cal shouts at her to get out. And it's kind of a great scene because the way he shouts get out, I mean, like it's kind of funny. It's not supposed to be funny, but it reminded me of like in certain Adam Sandler movies, Adam Sandler will yell in that just over the top way. And that's kind of what the James Dean yell reminded me of. So that was funny. Also, the nurse character, she's very similar in book and movie movie where she just has this weird attitude, and it's just very entertaining and quite the character in both. But to move on to book versus movie, so I tried to think of what I would have thought of this movie had I not read the book, and I think I would have really liked it. You know, James Dean performance, like at times, like it's just so simple, but so earnest, and also just like so endearing too. Like we have the scene where he is going to the farm to see the bean sprouts, which he has invested in, and he's like dancing among the bean sprouts in just this boyish, innocent way that is just so endearing. But then he's also just like so raw and filled with longing, you know, like that scene where he breaks down crying after his dad rejects him, which in some ways it felt a bit over the top, if I'm being honest, but I didn't hate it. I was not a fan of the guy who played Adam, and even Elia Kazan, I think I read, didn't love that actor either. But I think everybody else was well cast and well done, so I didn't have any other complaints with the acting. And there were some cool Dutch angles, and we also have this cool shot where Cal returns home and Aron is missing, and this is when Adam asks, like, where's your brother? And Cal says, am I my brother's keeper? And he says this while he is swinging, and so he is standing up on a swing and is going back and forth as he is talking to his dad, and it was just a really cool shot. But at the end of the day, even though I do like this movie and I would recommend it, I don't love the changes they made with Kate. For one, I wish they would have kept her closer to the book, and I wish we would have seen what happened to her too. Like, although her suicide in the movie wouldn't have been as impactful as it had been in the book, because in the book, we'd been following her for so long, whereas in the movie, it's not like we knew her that well. So in the end though, the book still wins. I love this book. It's so epic and so in-depth, and just a great character analysis, great symbolism, great biblical parallels. And then you also have, you know, the Cain and Abel and Cal and Aron, but you also have the Cain and Abel with Charles and Adam, and just the stuff with his dad who like made his money off a lie. And then Cathy, who made her money, you know, running this brothel, and then her money goes to Aron, who is like just very pure and good. So that theme of like someone twisted and bad making money, but then that money ends up going to someone good, because Adam is considered like a good, pure person, you know, in the book. And so it's just ironic that this dirty money goes to someone good and pure. But yeah, there's just so much to think about with this book, so I definitely love it. It's incredible. John Steinbeck considers it his magnum opus, and it's like the book he's most proud of. And he does share some personal stories of his own childhood, and he himself is like a character in the book at one point, so I did think that was cool. And also, like, historically, it talks about World War I and how that affected Salinas. And there's a German guy in book and movie who is like harassed by the town simply because he's German. He's been living there for like decades. But now with World War I happening, suddenly they're like, he's evil, he's a spy, he's German, and it was just really sad. But yeah, that's in the movie, and it came from the book where Steinbeck talks about that and how he himself as a kid like said something messed up to this man and it caused him to just start weeping. And Steinbeck writes how like even to this day, when he thinks about that, he's filled with so much guilt and shame for the way he treated that man. But yeah, so historically it's a really fascinating book. But yeah, it's amazing. And I did really like this movie, so I would recommend it for the most part. There is a mini-series starring Jane Seymour and Lloyd Bridges, which I'm curious to see. So it is 6 hours long. If I do watch it, I will talk about that on my Patreon, and that will be my Patreon episode. So I am planning on doing that. I love Jane Seymour. I think she would be great as Kate, so I'm excited to watch it. It's just that it's a mini-series. I just have a hard time committing so much time to a TV show or a movie, right? So 6 hours is a lot for me personally, but I got the DVDs, so I'm planning on watching it. So that will most likely be this month's Patreon episode. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Please comment your thoughts down below on what you think of this book, this movie, on what the symbolism of it all means in your mind. And yeah, I guess that wraps it up. So thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Bye.